Good evening, you guys, and welcome to the KP Kingdom channel. It is I, your host, the KP King himself, and today I will be featuring you my Dragonic Vanquisher deck profile with the changes to the deck after the release of the newest set, Majesty Lord Blaster, and to handle some of the changes that will be coming to the metagame itself with the introduction of the Phantom Dragon Aeon set in English. For our first grade 3, we play 4 copies of Dragonic Vanquisher, this star of the deck, and the main boss monster of the Narukami clan at this moment. Dragonic Vanquisher's ability is continuous during your turn. If 3 cards are bound, you can add 10,000 power to the front row, and then its second ability lets you counterblast 1, bind 1 card from any player's front row, which will be important and I'll moment that later, and then if you have a grade 3 in Soul, you may bind 1 card from both players' hand. So this ability altogether makes it a really amazing card. It's very self-sufficient and it does a lot just on the Vanguard alone. The 10k power continuously is very important because this deck likes to make multiple attacks by superior calling units out to the board with the Excel markers. So the additional power from this on top of the Excel marker, whether you're playing Excel 1 or 2, can be an additional 15,000 power or 20,000 power if you're Excel 1. And then having the superior calls and it being continuous means that any new unit that you call out to your front row after you've gotten that 3rd card bound will get that 10,000 power before or after trigger effects. So therefore, even your weakest unit, which can be 8k or 7k, can at least be 17k, which is already a magical number against Force decks and Excel decks, as that takes out or prevents them from using a 5k guard because you're simply poking them for over that power limit. So Dragonic Vanquisher alone, its first skill makes it extremely powerful. The second ability, however, is mainly what a lot of people like. Being able to bind a card from your opponent's front row for 1 counterblast. Nothing new to Narukami, we have plenty of skills to do that. It's the ability that binds a card from your hand and your opponent's hand that's helpful. Your opponent's negging 1 card before the attacks begin, and then binding a card from your own hand is helpful as you have units in the deck that can be superior calls from binding them out. And then just to inform you, that bind from your hand and from their hand already sets up the 2 card bind on top of you have the front row bind, so that this way you can get 3 cards bound. So for 1 counterblast, you're essentially binding 3 cards, 2 from your opponent's field and then 1 from yourself, so you can get that 3 card bound limit and get 10k to your front row. So this card is very self-sufficient and overall really amazing to have. And I think it's the star of Narukami, and I just simply can't wait to see what full Bronto brings to the deck. 4 copies of Jaggy Shot Dragoon. This card is the main support for the deck. I do not believe that Dragonic Vanquisher would work with or without this card, but to explain what it does, it's when it attacks a Vanguard, you can bind a card from your hand to bind one of your opponent's front row units. If they don't have a front row unit, then you draw a card. And then at the end of the battle it attacks, if your Vanguard's Vanquisher, you put this in Soul and draw a card. So this card does everything that a support unit should do, especially for a grade 3. It offers you card draw, it binds an opponent's front row unit, it binds a card from your hand to set up for your multi-attacking superior calls, and then it moves itself to the Soul so that you can draw a card. Now, the reason why that's so important is because, as we stated earlier with Vanquisher's skill, you need a grade 3 in your Soul in order for you to get that other effect to bind your opponent's hand for your next turn. So if you can't do the re-ride because you don't have another Vanquisher in hand, or if you didn't draw into it with Jaggy Shot, by having this card into the Soul, on your next turn you at least have the grade 3 in the Soul so you can activate this skill. The binding from hand is also important as, like I said before, it does help with your multi-attacking, and it is a battle phase bind, so you're calling more units out during your battle phase set for more attacks. And in doing so, when you reach that 3 card bound limit, don't forget that 10,000 power from Vanquisher is still in effect. So the new units called out by this will get 10,000 powers from this. So overall, this is probably the most important grade 3 to have in the deck. I don't play Daytonics or Gauntlet Buster simply because there are other cards in the deck that I wanted to play and I didn't feel like playing those cards were necessary, even in this metagame right now. I know it's a popular thing to do in Japan, but I just didn't feel it was necessary for me personally. Now for our grade 2s, I played 2 copies of Voltage Horn Dragon. So this is a tech grade 2, as I know that some people have walked away for this. This is the card that you take out to play more grade 3s, or you use it to play Dragonic Death Scythe. My issue with Death Scythe, however, is that Death Scythe's power boost is 8k and it's only for 1 turn. And then you get 3 or 5k, but that's all it is. So it's essentially a 14k beat stick after you use its skill. With this card, however, and its ability, it's much better. So what Voltage Horn does is, during your turn, if you bound any card in the player's field, it gets 5k. So make it 14k so you can get over those power numbers. But its second ability is what I really play it for. It's when it attacks the Vanguard, you counterblast one, you choose a column, you bind a card in that column, and then you pick one of your opponent's front row units and move it to the front. And the reason why it's important is because a lot of decks now are getting clever while playing their units in the back for certain skills, or having units in the back row that can intercept. So that this way they don't have to call anything to the front, so that they can prevent you from getting your bind or reaching your bind limit if you don't already have that Dragonic Vanquisher off. So with this card, what it does is it rewards us for binding cards during the battle phase, and it gives us power as well as helps get those units out the back row. This way you can target more of your opponent's board and destroy it so you can activate effects. So Voltage Horn Dragon, just for me as a personal card that I like to play, you don't have to play this card, but for me I like to play 2 of it. For our next grade 2, we play 2 copies of Fiendish Sword Eradicator Cho-Oh. So Cho-Oh, after it got restricted, you can only play 2 of it. However, it's still a very important unit to have. So its Vanguard and Rearguard Circle is when placed. It does the same thing as Voltage Horn. You bind a card in the front row, move a unit from the back row to the front. I still think that's very important to have, and it's still good to do to help get rid of those units, and its main phase, so that works out well. So when you bind stuff during the battle phase. And then its second ability is what you really play it for, which is once per turn, at the end of the battle that your Vanguard attacked, you may counterblast 1 and stay in this unit if your opponent has no front row units. Getting rid of front row units is what this deck does, so that's never a problem. But this assists with a multi-attacking strategy, as along with this helps you get possibly additional 6 to 7 attacks in a turn to help out with killing your opponent. So having 2 of this to get those multiple attacks off is still really good in my opinion, and I don't think it should be replaced for anything. Just enjoy the 2 that you have. For our next grade 4, we play 4 copies of Vulture Shred Dragon. This card, in my opinion, is a backup Jaggy Shot. It's when it attacks, if your Vanguard is Dragonic Vanquisher, you Soul Blast 1, draw a card, then bind a card from your hand. So this card essentially does this first part of the skill that Jaggy Shot does without the bind. However, you're binding one of your own cards so that you can get a card draw and set up your multi-attacks. This card essentially helps you with more multi-attacks. That's really all it does, along with adding cards to your hand to get more card advantage. But this is beneficial in the fact that you get to draw first and then bind a card from your hand. Therefore, if you don't have the piece, you can take a gamble and draw a card and hope that you pull a Shatura or a Bajan to get multiple attacks off. The MVP of the grade 2 lineup is 4 copies of Demonic Dragon Berserker Shatura. The reason why I say this is the MVP, because this is the main card that you want to call out for your multiple attacks. Its ability is, when bound from your hand, you get to call this card out and get 10,000 power. And then its second effect is, when it attacks your opponent's Vanguard, you draw a card, a bind unit in the front row. And this card overall is amazing. It's only 8k, which does suck, and it does suck to write it. However, it gets 10k on place, so that makes you're at the 18 point limit. And then if you have Vanquisher off, because you already bound this from your hand, that adds onto your 3 card bind limit. This becomes 28, throw out an Excel marker, you become 38, 33. This card makes good numbers, strong, helps with your multi-attacking, has a pressure on hit ability because it lets you draw a card, and can bind you in the front row if you need to get that bind. Overall, this card just does everything that we need it to do. It's really amazing, really powerful card. And you need to play 4 of this. You have to play 4 of this because this is essentially the main card that you want to call, like I said earlier, for your multiple attacks. As you don't have any other cards in the deck right now, or in the game at least at this moment, that can do this from this bound from hand calling the board that apply this much pressure. So Shatura just gives us a lot of offensive pressure, and that's what we want. Now for our grade 1s. I play 1 copy of Dragon Dancer Anastasia. This is a tech card. This card can either be Helena or the grade 1 Discharge Dragon that moves a card from the back row to the front, or if you want, you can go back to playing the Demolition Dragon to get more power in the rear guard. However, I play Anastasia just simply because I think it's a cool looking card. Now, for our next grade 1, we play 4 copies of Desert Gunner Bajan. So Bajan is another one of our bound from hand calling units that assists with our multiple attacking strategy. When it's bound from hand, you simply call it to the rear guard. Its second ability is when placed, if you bound a card during this turn, you get to soul charge 1. So this deck doesn't have a soul issue. However, sometimes if you do need the extra soul, because you ever do run into a soul issue, which rarely ever happens, it's just there to help out. You're essentially calling this card to the front row, or calling it to the back row because you want to make a stronger column, but you need this card so it assists with your multiple attacking strategy. So therefore, we play 4 of this to get more attacks off, as that's really what it's mainly for. For the MVP of the grade 1 lineup, we play 4 copies of Rising Phoenix. I don't think it's a debate that Rising Phoenix is probably the best grade 1 that Narukami has, but for those that do not know, it has the drop zone ability where when your opponent's card is bound, you can superior call a unit from the drop zone and add 3000 power. So as you've noticed through the deck profile, a lot of the cards that we have are mainly battle phase binding, like Jaggy Shot, Voltage Horn, and Shatura. And the reason why that's important is because we can superior call our Rising Phoenixes out during the battle phase over another Rising Phoenix, or to our Excel marker over one of our other cards to get more power, and then essentially have more attacks. So if having this card in the drop zone, because you discard it for fodder or other skills, helps you get more attacks, and sometimes your opponent just doesn't see it coming because you don't want to get the front moves that you have, but if you need to, you can get this to get 2 more attacks in a turn. I don't think there's any debate on what Rising Phoenix can do. It just assists with multi-attacking, and it's really powerful to have. You have to play 4 of this. You are not playing Narukami without playing 4 of this. Finally, for our last grade 1, we play 4 copies of Mighty Bolt Dragoon. Mighty Bolt Dragoon is our grade 3 search for the deck. We either want to get Vanquisher because we need to ride it, or we want Jaggy Shot because we need support. Essentially, those are the 2 grade 3s that you need, and you always want to see them, so having Mighty Bolt to search them out is really helpful. And then its 5k ability to get more power on the rear guard. When you bind any player's card, it's simply helpful because on top of the 10k, this becomes a 23 or 28 attacker in the front row if you needed to. So we need to play 4 of this as well, as it helps us search out our grade 3s and create stronger rearguard columns. For our trigger lineups, I play 6 critical, which is 2 copies of Yellow Gem Carbuncle, 4 copies of Spark Edge Draco Kid, 6 criticals in the deck because I don't like playing fronts right now. I think that fronts are good, but the deck doesn't have a power problem because you can always get to that 3-card bind, whether you have to use your own cards or you have to bind your opponent's cards because they were being aggressive. So you're already adding 10k to the front row, and then you have the multiple attacking units that get power when they're called out, and then these criticals just make your attacks feel more threatening. Replacing these with fronts or dropping at least down to 2 and then playing 4 fronts is fine, but I'd rather my opponent be scared that a critical's coming than worry about a front coming, because they can simply just guard that or can be at 4 damage and then not have to worry about seeing a critical and then take the next attack so they can survive everything else. So crits for pressure. Then I play 6 draws. I play 2 copies of Old Dragon Mage and then 4 copies of Wyvern Guard Ghoul. So although our deck does draw a lot of cards, we still want to see our pieces and boost our hand, and having 6 draw triggers to do that is fine. You can take out one of these and replace it with another critical trigger if you want. I honestly think that's good. That's probably what I'm going to do later. But right now I'm playing 6/6 simply because I like having a big hand to guard against my opponent's strong attacks, as sometimes this deck does have a defense issue, or you need to draw on your pieces like I said earlier to get board back, or if you need to buy one of your own cards, then this is just fodder for doing that. But 6 draw is pretty standard right now for Narukami, so I'm just happy to be playing that. But like I said before, you can take these out and play more criticals, or until we get our critical sentinel for Narukami, then that deck can change and then you can go with 6 crit, 6 front if you want to. But for me, I just think that 6 draw or 5 draw is safe to play. And then we play 4 copies of Worm Toxin Eradicator Sea Oboe because you still need heals, you can't play balls to the walls like that, and this is the only heal trigger that Narukami has that I actually like looking at. And then our starter for the deck is the Spark Kid Dragoon, simply because I like the Wyvern Kid series, and I like the Draco Kid series, and this was the one that I wanted to play. But that is all for this deck profile, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. I have plenty of more content coming out soon. And if your friends thinking about building Dragonic Vanquisher, then don't forget to share this video with them, and they can use this deck as a guideline for whatever build they want to play. This deck is just a combination of personal cards that I like, some play testing, and some ideas I took from some Japanese deck lists that actually worked out pretty well. But that is all that I have for you today, guys. I will see you soon. Goodbye.